time.
Good morning and welcome to another episode of The Week That Was. I'm Saeed Khan, and as you might notice, we have some of our regulars and some of our other guests not here. I assure you none of them are deported and none of them took a wrong turn onto the Ambassador Bridge, at least so far as we know. We probably will have a few of them joining us, but for those of you who were unable to make it, hope you can make it for another show. Oh, there, as we speak, we have another one of our regulars here. We have veteran journalist Nancy Derringer. We have labor and community activist Barb Ingalls. We have two of our esteemed attorney troika available. We have Joel Sklar and Bill Seikaly. Steve Fisher.
Not playing golf.
Golfing, that's right.
Not golfing.
And of course, we have co-founder of Deadline Detroit, Allan Lengel. Well, this week has served as a bit of a passing, if you will. Pope Francis I, the first Jesuit pontiff, the first pontiff elected from Latin America, passed away at the age of 88 after having been hospitalized a few weeks ago for several weeks with what seemed to be a near fatal condition, having then passed the very next morning after Easter Sunday of what seems to be a stroke and an irreversible heart failure.
I was reliably informed that he was killed by J.D. Vance. So.
Yes, we've all agreed on that.
There is.
I read it on Facebook. It must be true.
It is.
There is that subtext on Truth Social. So, thoughts about this Pope? Thought about the Catholic Church in general, and who are you fan-dueling to be the next pontiff?
Well, am I the only Catholic on this, or at least former Catholic? Barb,
Recovering.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, we're all recovering. That's our position here. I feel kind of ill qualified under these circumstances to comment on the Pope, but I feel like I'm more qualified than the Jews. So I'm going to go ahead and talk.
Most likely.
But we didn't kill him. Let's make that clear.
Not since 1965.
I think he's going to be remembered as a great Pope, as one who talked about the things that needed to be talked about at a very divisive time, not just in the world of Catholicism, but in the world in general. I think he was correct to put the emphasis on the poor, which is obviously that was what Jesus was all about. But I did see a headline, and I did not read the story. I think it was in the New York Times that said something like Francis's legacy includes galvanizing the Catholic right, the right wing, essentially. And that, I guess there's always, for every action, there's a reaction. And in this case, it meant a reactionary Catholic Church now. I mean, I know quite a few people who consider themselves not just Catholics the way those of us growing up consider ourselves Catholics, but like Orthodox Catholics or traditional Catholics or ultra Catholics. And it's just it might as well be a whole different faith, because they're about smells and bells and, and the rest of it. And it's kind of sad to me, but that's the way it goes.
Well, I did hear that.
I did hear that my extemporaneous freestyling on the Pope. So go ahead.
Well, I did hear that they have canceled DEI at the Vatican, so there will not be a female Pope. That much we know. Allan,
or an African.
I think really the cool thing about the Pope is that a Pope like this Pope was that he was really a leader, even for the Jews. I mean, the Jews embraced him for what he stood for. When they had the German Pope who had been in the brown shirts when he was younger, I think the Jews were a little bit uncomfortable about that. But this was a Pope who really was a world leader, more so than our world leader here, and a moral leader and stuff like that. And I think it didn't matter what religion you were. A lot of people embraced him. So
there is a bit of saltiness, though, Allan. I know that the Israeli Foreign Ministry had posted may his memory be a blessing, and then it was deleted. And the Israeli government is not sending a delegation for the funeral because of the statements that he made regarding Gaza. So I think there still is some tension with Israel. Yeah,
Allan made the distinction between Jewish people and the Israeli government, which I think is an important.
Two different things.
Fully true.
Yeah.
Fully true.
Yeah. You know, go ahead. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt.
Look, I mean, I was raised as an Orthodox and a Catholic, and I escaped both of those conundrums. But, and I don't want to talk about the religion. I think Nancy probably said it better than I could have anyhow. But I do think that this man will be remembered for is as a moral leader.
Yes.
No matter what his position was, he happened to use his position as Pope. The fact that he wanted to be buried in a simple wooden box rather than the ornate kind of burials that popes usually get. That he wanted poor people there, not just dignitaries. He was fairly explicit in this, and he was all about embracing people who were disadvantaged. He called, beginning when the war began in Gaza, he called a Catholic enclave there. And he called every night from the beginning of the war until the day before he died. Here's a man who didn't just use words to be a moral leader, he used his actions. And I think that no matter what your religious beliefs are, no matter what your political beliefs are, you need to be respectful of who he is, who he was. And, I admire him. He was much in the way of Gandhi, a moral leader.
I was kind of surprised. I was talking to a retired DC cop who I'm still very good friends with, older than I am, and I said, "Hey, I'm really sorry." He's a good Italian Catholic guy, and I said, "Hey, I'm really sad about the Pope." And he went, I don't know. He's kind of a socialist. I was like, what? I was like, come on, man. I was surprised the politics there if somebody would view it that way. But
go ahead, Barb.
I think it's going to be really, really interesting to see how this all goes, how the conclave goes, and who they end up choosing.
Because it's Ray Fiennes. We already know.
I'm fine with that. I would be okay with Stanley Tucci too, because then the food would be better in the Vatican. But I think there really was a lot to admire about this man, and there was also, if you were one of those conservative Catholics, there was a lot to hate about him. Mm-hmm. And there are people really, really, really hoping that they get one of the really bad popes that would send us even further backward into the Middle Ages. He embraced everybody. I'm not one of them. There really is a difference between, and the Jesuits in particular are really like an intellectual, muscular kind of order. They really value religion, education, and thinking outside of your own religion.
I just want to say, go ahead. I'm sorry. I thought you were done. Keep talking.
No, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say, I took a minute there to quickly Google John Paul II's funeral, and he too was buried in a plain box. So I think that's, I can't think of how many papal funerals that I've even seen photographs from in my lifetime. I guess John the 26th?
John the 23rd, then it was Paul the 6th, and then it was John Paul I, John Paul II.
The first pope I remember people talking about in my Catholic education was Pope Paul. So then it was Paul, and then he died, and then it was John Paul for a month. Oh, P.S. Journalism, fun fact, the New York Times was on strike for the entirety of John Paul I's papacy.
Was that around the same time that Elton John said that they said that God is dead?
No.
You've been spending too much time around Saeed if you can come up with it.
I remember that when they came back to work, some august, graybeard at the New York Times said, "We have missed an entire papacy." It was like, well, it was 30 days, so let's not make too much Too much.
I lived in a
chaos
house
involved.
with a girl who was a reporter at the Free Press at the time before we were both married. We had a little house in Detroit that we had millions of parties at, and she was really anti-Catholic. She was not Catholic. And I woke her up one time and I went, hey, the Pope died. And she goes, I know the fucking Pope died. And I went, no, the Pope died again. How did you do that?
You know, I went to the Vatican twice when Francis was there, and I got to meet him and I got to speak with him.
You got to
Because
meet
you're
the
Saeed
Pope?
fucking Khan, man.
How did you figure that? How did that work out? How did that happen?
So in typical Larry David form, Rabbi David Rosen and I were invited as the two non-Catholics at a conference 9 years ago,
Okay.
and so Rabbi Rosen spoke about the Hebrew notion of love, and I spoke about the Islamic notion of mercy, and we were granted an audience with the Pope. And the first thing I noticed is when he walks in, he was just wearing a pair of black loafers, kind of like my Skechers, not the Prada red ones that are custom made for every Pope.
Yeah, the John Paul is.
But when I was introduced to him by the convening cardinal, the cardinal was telling him in Italian. He says, you know, this is Professor Saeed Khan from Wayne State in Detroit. He's a Muslim, son Musulman. And it was the same way as Bib Fortuna tells Jabba the Hutt, you know, Luke Skywalker, Jedi Knight. But the Pope, in just the softest voice, tells me, thank you for bringing Islam to the Vatican.
Oh,
and it was sweet. So I spoke to him in Spanish, so he wouldn't have to translate, even though he's fluent in English. And I said, you embody the virtues and the principles of the Prophet Muhammad. And he lowered his eyes as if to say, I'm not worthy of the compliment. And I gave him a shirt from Detroit versus Everybody that says everybody versus poverty. And he gave me a thumbs up. So I'd like to think that as he's lying in state, that shirt's, you know.
Saeed, do you have tenure yet? Because if you don't, I there's no justice in the world. So,
but the thing that I noticed is before that I got there early enough to see the Wednesday open mass, and I couldn't believe the amount of young people who were. It was like a pop concert.
Yeah.
And I think one of his lasting legacies is he made the church cool for young people, and especially from the global South. And so I think that for all of the stuffy ones on the side of Team Benedict and a lot of the American archbishops and cardinals, they really ought to consider what Francis has done to basically save their jobs. Nancy?
Since I'm full of fun facts about the Catholic Church today, I think it's, I really, this is something that I only learned about fairly recently in my life, and I've been fascinated by ever since, which is the protocol for when you meet the Pope. And I assume you were wearing a suit.
Armani.
Oh wow, Armani suit. That's very nice. So anyway, when women meet the Pope, you are expected to wear black and a black mantilla, you know, a long veil, essentially, that touches your shoulders at least. And if you can Google like papal audience Trump, papal audience Obama, and you will see the like Mrs. Obama and Mrs. Trump in that outfit, in something like that outfit. I mean, it's not a uniform, but it's just something that's expected, unless you are a Catholic queen of a Catholic country. Then you may wear white, and it's called privilege du blanc, which means white privilege essentially. And you wear a white dress and a white mantilla. And it's fascinating because there's only like 5 women in the world who are entitled to the white privilege, and one of them is the Princess of Monaco, Princess Charlene, which is she's my favorite royal in the entire planet because she has this white trash name, Charlene. It's like something from Dallas or whatever, and she's one of the most miserable, unhappy women in the world. She's the one who tried to run from her wedding day. She's like, they had to essentially tackle her at the airport. She was trying to get away before she had to marry this creep who doesn't know how to use a condom. He's got like 5, we call them illegitimate, but children out of wedlock in the rest of the world. And but she apparently has met the Pope, and she wears white. She's very beautiful too. She's a former
Why would you slur Charlene Tilton, the actress who played Lucy Ewing on Dallas?
But just Princess Charlene. It's just something so
I just want to point out that there are a number of white women who are members of Congress that would disagree with you. That there are only 5 women in the world entitled to white privilege.
Oh,
Taylor Greene,
you on this panel right now. So.
There's also something slightly racist about only talking about Catholic queens, Nancy, when we have Caribbean queen, we sharing our same dream, and our hearts are beat as one.
For the purpose of, I hope that Alan is Saeed just texted Alan and me the pictures from his meeting with the Pope, and I want him to put some in the.
I've seen it.
Anyway, go ahead.
I have two mantillas
okay.
from about 1900 that 2 of my great aunts went to Rome and got to meet the Pope, and they're full length. And I mean, people were tinier then, but these are, I mean, they're gorgeous. I don't know what the hell to do with them. They're in a box, and I keep thinking that somebody should have them, but me.
All women carry a box of crap through their lives that's completely.
This is part of them. I have gloves from the 60s. I've got my mom's little teeny hat. I've got all sorts of stuff like that. See, isn't that cool?
Wow. I love that.
That was when I first met you. We were both on the board, and you went, "I'm going to meet the Pope. You want me?" And I went, "Just shut up." You don't,
hey,
I didn't know you were a tiny fucking con then.
So I asked everybody that I knew who was Catholic if they wanted me to take anything to get blessed, and I had 5 kilos of stuff in a Ziploc bag, and I asked the Pope. I said, "Would you please?" And he laughed, and he just put his hands. He's like, this muzzy from Detroit with a bunch of Catholic swag. I'm doing this.
That's wonderful.
It was pretty amazing. Well, when we're looking at other things happening in the news, and via con Dios to the Pope, looks like the Supreme Court is actually pushing back a little bit on the Trump administration, having issued a late night stop to the White House, and I'll use this in quotation marks, deportation effort, because deportation usually suggests due process and other legal avenues being used. Is this a source of optimism? It looks like the only 2 people who really had a problem with this suspension were Alito and Thomas.
And boy, talk about a scathing dissent by Alito. Which was absurd, by the way. I mean, if you read the opinion and you read his dissent, how dare anybody suggest that these people are entitled to due process?
Can you go into some more detail about the scathing dissent? Was it really like that? Or are you exaggerating for the sake of sarcasm?
No, it was scathing.
It was. Okay.
There have been a couple of things, Nancy, in the last few weeks. This dissent on what should have been a pretty pro forma decision. I mean, this was not the idea that a 1-hour notice written in a language that the people can't speak is somehow fulfilling a due process requirement. Seems silly, I think, to most people. Alito and Thomas being the exception. But his scathing dissent about the majority opinion, the Supreme Court claims to really value civility and decorum. You saw this with, you've seen this with justices who are completely on the other side of the political spectrum, who treat one another with great dignity and great respect. And yet Alito now is interrupting judges during an argument.
Wow.
Unheard of. And this dissent was highly personal. So I think that we're beginning to see a real crack in the wall in support of Trump. And I think it's caused by Trump just overreaching and going way, way too far.
Huh.
Well, Bill, this sort of then falls into the idea of why the administration is sending these individuals to certain cases for being detained, like Louisiana, because it is under the jurisdiction of the Fifth Circuit. So they're judge shopping, but also I believe that the Fifth Circuit, because every one of the circuits, when they file for an emergency review up to the Supreme Court, one of the justices is assigned to that circuit.
And it just so happens is assigned to each circuit.
And for the Fifth Circuit, that judge happens to be Samuel Alito. Oh. And so he took the case for emergency review, but I think it looked like they were hoping to slow walk the case. Roberts, it seems, as Chief Justice, intervened, and with a 7-2, were able to put the suspension in place. Part of Alito's gripe was that not only did they override him, but also that he claims that it was done too quickly.
Huh. You know, I think we're seeing that really the last defense for democracy is coming from the courts. Royce Lambert, U.S. District Judge out of D.C., who's a Reagan appointee, just told the Voice of America that they can rehire all 1,300, I think, employees, saying the White House can't shut it down. It's got to be Congress is the one that has to do it. So we're seeing some, a lot of good rulings, thankfully, because there's we can't rely on Congress to save us.
Well, we're going to have to. Here's the problem. Let me try to pull a couple different things together if I could. The Supreme Court, the courts can make these rulings. The constitutional crisis, as some people like to talk about, or the real issue is going to be what happens when the courts say one thing, including the Supreme Court, and Trump says, bullshit, it's a separation of powers issue, I'm not abiding by it. Only Congress can act then. And only Congress can save us then, or can save the system then. Is there any evidence that they're going to act? Not right now. However, if you look at the polls, and there have been a couple major articles that I was reading this morning out, Trump seems to have lost all of his non-MAGA support. That's going to make members of Congress, Republican members of Congress in swing areas, purple areas, very, very nervous. If they begin to peel off, then there may be some support from Congress. Some of the people who have never liked Trump anyhow and want to oppose him may begin to develop a spine or some gonads.
Joel, I'm not trying to be.
If Congress does not act, it doesn't matter what the courts do.
Joel, I'm not trying to be flippant here, but if there was a challenge by the White House that this is a violation of separation of powers, isn't it for the Supreme Court to determine the constitutionality of that? And wouldn't it get kicked back up?
Absolutely. Yeah. All these are legal issues. I mean, I'm not so boistered by the opinion. I'm glad the things were stopped, but Alito scares me. Clarence Thomas scares me. The malleability of the court still scares me. Roberts still scares me. I don't trust him for anything. I'm not. I think he's a terrible Chief Justice. So I wouldn't get too optimistic. I'm glad there's finally some brakes on this off the rail train. But I'm with Bill. I think the more that Trump goes insane, because this is a mad king. The more that we see the mad king be mad, the more institutions around the mad king may say, you know what, we're not mad. We're going to start imposing some guidelines because this is far beyond what anybody could have conceived, even though it was all well within our conception at the time.
Well, Allan, you said that Royce Lambert has reinstated or has ruled for the reinstatement of the Voice of America people. I think that the budget savings from that were going to be used by the White House to explore ways to encourage women to have more children, including having tutorials about maintaining and understanding their menstrual cycle, as well as offering $5,000 to anybody who would have a child. Are we now really in Gilead?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we really are. Unless we're in Nazi Germany, because this was also a explicit, outright plan of Hitler's regime. Was I don't speak any German, not even a Dankeschön word of it, but wasn't there something called Kinderkutsche something or other? Come on, Saeed, you got the big brain.
Kinderkutsche was actually a song by a German pop star who performed it on Soul Train back in '74.
No, it was like Kinderkutsche. I forget what the third one was, but it's basically it's heart health and or heart, home, and children essentially. I looked it up on Wikipedia this week, and I learned that it's kind of the German equivalent of barefoot and pregnant. But the idea was to get whites.
It's Kinderkutsche Kirche.
Okay, and that means children, home,
Church.
and
No, church and kitchen.
and church. Okay, children, church, and kitchen. Okay, got it. So the idea is that I mean they wanted white Germans, Aryans, to reproduce, have lots of kids. I mean, that was the whole idea. And the idea is the same here, but it is so pig-headed and blind to what young women really need in order to feel more confident in bringing more children in the world. And it's like less expensive childcare, more generous leave. Essentially, we would need to become Scandinavia in our approach to babies and mothers in order to really boost the birth rate. I mean, look at what a house costs now. You're talking. I mean, and is this effort being aimed at like Black women, at Latino women?
I know.
At Usha Vance?
Really,
Yeah.
no. This is about their whole replacement theory.
Right.
Is that white women are staying home and having cats instead of babies, and so we're part of the problem, and let's get on it.
Right. Exactly. So it's so offensive, and it's like try asking a 25-year-old woman today what she would need in order to bring kids into the world, and instead of asking JD Vance or Joe Rogan or some other manosphere idiot. I mean, where did these ideas come from? Tracking your menstrual cycle? Do they think women don't know how this happens? God.
They won't track guns, but they'll track menstrual cycles.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
They won't register guns, but they want autistic people to be registered.
Yes.
I mean,
it's
is
very offensive.
Nana land.
I know.
I also want to point out one other thing that I think ties into this, if I could, for just 1 second, and that is that there have been 2 states in which FEMA, despite the fact that these people are qualified under all standards under the statute, has refused to provide assistance for flood victims in Kentucky and North Carolina. I mean, talk about a scary time. And what does he want this money for? To provide tax breaks to the oligarchs.
Mm-hmm.
This is terrifying, guys.
Who barely pay any taxes to begin with. So
I was going to say, it's a little late for a segue, but I am curious about Larry David's, about people's opinions on Larry David's piece in the New York Times, mocking Bill Maher for meeting with Trump, and what people think about.
Yeah.
If everyone's familiar, Bill Maher, brokered through Kid Rock, met with Trump, and then said, he's really a different kind of guy in person, and he's really not as big an asshole as we really see him as on the stage there. So Larry David wrote a piece in the New York Times saying my dinner with Hitler.
My dinner with Adolf.
My dinner with Adolf. And he basically mocked and said, hey, Adolf, not such a bad guy. And, we talked about this and we had a good conversation. My feeling is, Bill Maher came back and said, once you use the Hitler, you've lost the argument already. And my feeling is, there's 2 components to the comparisons to Hitler. There's the pre-World War II with, the Holocaust and all that. But there's a Germany in the 1930s, which Trump is following the playbook. And the question becomes, when a guy like Bill Maher meets with him, is he really opening up dialogue, or is it a transactional thing where Trump is basically neutralizing a critic, or at least sort of softening that critic? The thought that, would you have gone to visit Adolf Hitler and said, hey, you're doing a lot of really horrible things, but you're not such a bad guy? I mean, I covered prisons. One of my beats when I was in the Lansing Bureau, Detroit News, I talked to guys, rapists. One of my good sources was a cop killer. And you talk to them, and after a while, you forget
Charming.
who they are and what they've done, and you're just having regular conversations. And
Serial killers were all charming.
Yeah,
it's amazing. It's like every case that I've had where somebody's been a felon or somebody's had some god-awful crime, they are charming. I mean, part of the pathology of some criminals is to be charming. Trump perhaps may be one of those criminals who can be charming with someone for a short period of time. But I Bill Maher thinks he's more than he is. He jumped the shark with this. I think he's lost all credibility. It wasn't bringing up the Hitler name to say the atrocity. It's bringing a parallel. It's what parody is about. I thought it was brilliantly written. I mean, if you haven't read it, you should. It's funny, it's entertaining, and it's right on point. And again, I think Bill. I can't stand the guy. I think he's a pompous ass to begin with. But I fully agree with David.
His episode, Larry David's episode on Curb with wearing the MAGA hat as a sort of a repellent was great. But Joel, about 8 years ago, I was in Saudi Arabia, and I had an audience with Crown Prince MBS, Mohammed bin Salman. And this was about
jet-setting Saeed Khan. Go ahead.
This was, and by the way, I didn't give him anything to bless.
Okay.
But I remember meeting him, and this was about 9 months before the whole Khashoggi thing. And when you're talking about charm, also not MBS, but I gotta say, I mean, and Bill, you'll appreciate this. It was like the Beyonce song. He made me feel like I'm the only girl in the world. But the whole idea about their skill set to go ahead and have that charm. Now, to be fair, I've never backed off from my critiques or my objective analysis of anything regarding Saudi Arabia, in case that was an issue. But I got to ask the question, Allan, because you're talking about Bill Maher, who is influential, but people also see him as a comedian. But the fact that there's a chilling effect on storied shows like 60 Minutes and CBS News has had to capitulate to the pressures of a $2 billion lawsuit filed by Trump. And I think there's a video about this.
Yes, sir.
This lawsuit, no matter how bogus it is, and it is bogus, is affecting their news coverage because their executive producer, Bill Owens of 60 Minutes, resigned in protest over what he referred to as threats to their journalistic independence. And I believe it. I mean, I don't know if you saw 60 Minutes on Sunday night, but their new show Open, it seems a little off.
I'm Leslie Stahl.
I'm Bill Whitaker.
I'm Anderson Cooper.
I'm Sharon Alfonsi.
I'm John Wertheim.
I'm Cecilia Vega.
I'm Herschel Walker.
I'm Chuck Norris.
I'm God, Guns, and Gary, 36.
I'm the guy who Lauren Boebert gave a hand to in the theater.
I'm Scott Pelley.
And I'm the QAnon shaman. These stories and more tonight on 60 Minutes.
Since when did the word job have to be censored? I'm just wondering. Well, but what about this attitude that it seems like some people are emboldened to have people either dig up stuff on them or to not be shy that there might be something, some skeletons in their closet because Trump got away with it, the whole Fifth Avenue shooting somebody. Gubernatorial candidate and current mayor of Detroit, Mike Duggan, has said that he, quote, welcomes, end quote, the opposition's quest to dig up dirt on him.
Do you think that he really meant that, though? Because is this another thing that came out of the interview with Carol Kane on stage at some, mutual masturbation event that they do around here all the time? What was that? It? I mean, I remember him.
No, I think he was saying. I think he was saying, "Come look, there's nothing here."
Oh.
No, I don't think he was saying that. I think he's trying to say this divisive bullshit that we're digging up dirt in people is shows how screwed up our system is, and it prevents us from getting things done. He's got some shit that people can use. He doesn't want it to come out, but what choice does he have? So he has to figure out a smart way to say, yeah, bring it out, and I'm going to just prove how screwed up our political system is, that you don't really want to accomplish anything. You just want to throw dirt at people. I think that's kind of
there's certainly an argument to be made that opposition research has gone a little too far, but I think it's absolutely valid. You want to know who you're voting for, and where it gets sticky is where you dig people's personal lives, where they have made mistakes that every human being has made. I mean, Duggan is forced, and I think there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that he was with his current wife before he was divorced from his first wife. And, that's a very common story, though. And I don't know if it's going to affect the way people feel about him. I mean, I'm more bothered by the fact that he's running as an independent and he's going to try to be a spoiler. And we're going to end up with Governor Helicopter John James. I mean, I mean, talk about a disastrous. I mean, I would hold Duggan personally responsible for that if that's what happened.
So on that topic, Nancy, apparently President Trump is going to be visiting Macomb County next week to commemorate his 100 days in office, and is going to be having a big rally. And I'm sure that Congressman John James is going to be there. My question is exactly which pant leg is John James going to be up, the left or the right of President Trump?
Well, if
this time it's been seen in Macomb County in months and months and months, so that'll be special.
If Trump flames out the way I expect that he probably will by 2026, because as you pointed out, I think it was Billy, he's already lost all of his non-MAGA support. Hang that dead raccoon around John James's neck, because he deserves it. That is just.
Though we say this, let me tell you that I got a message from somebody yesterday. The Trump store online is selling Trump 2028 hats.
Right.
Yeah.
Talk about terrifying.
Yeah, it is terrifying.
But I thought about this, Bill, and I'm wondering. I mean, I think he's going to push this thing to the edge. I mean, I'm hoping on 2028, and at the last minute, it's going to not be him. It's going to be one of his idiot sons who's going to announce. So technically speaking, he's not lying for once when he's got that sign, because it doesn't say Donald for 2028.
Yeah, look at
Uber driver in Cleveland.
I don't pray with Nancy on this to the extent that she still prays. I'm hoping, praying, pleading for Trump's demise, but I've been doing it for a long time, and he doesn't seem.
He has excellent medical care. They'll keep him alive like Ariel Sharon, for a year.
It's troubling to me that the American people don't see it. I mean, look at when I started reading about the fact that he wasn't providing FEMA funds to Kentucky and provided no explanation. Just didn't. You got to wonder. Happens to be a Democratic governor in that state. Maybe has something to do with it. But look, you would think the people would begin to see what's going on. Remember all the winning we were supposed to be having? Anybody's food prices going down? He says food prices are going down. Anybody's food prices going down?
No.
Happens to be inconsistent with reality. But he continues to get away with this nonsense, continues to spew this stuff. He was going to end the war in Ukraine and solve the problem in the Middle East in the first few days. He's made everything worse in Ukraine.
I think the Ukraine thing is that is so disgraceful that when they asked Trump, well, what is Russia giving up? He says Russia is not going to take over the whole country. I mean, he bragged about how he could broker peace on day one by basically giving Russia everything, saying, okay, Ukraine won't join NATO. We'll give you Crimea. We'll give you all the land that you've taken in this latest war and stuff like that. What kind of fucking, he's doing nothing for the Ukrainians.
Yeah.
You know, he can't negotiate. I mean, what you're seeing is this great negotiator is not a negotiator at all. He's a blunt instrument at best. You know, he doesn't have any nuance. There's nothing special about him. His negotiation tactics are blunt force, and that's it. And then they're inconsistent. And so I think the you know, in some ways, I think that the myth of Trump is shrinking. Just by his sheer incompetence and doubling down on sheer incompetence. You know, his Department of Defense is a joke. Everything that he's touching, you know, I remember in the campaign, oh, we're a laughing stock. Well, now we are a laughing stock.
We really are.
You know, we are. We fucked up the world's greatest economy for no reason. We're committing an economic suicide, God knows why. I think the allure of Trump is fading by the concrete impact of exactly what he's doing. And I think there is good. I never thought I'd see this, but I think there is a little. I'm hearing from my friends who voted for Trump, who's like, "What the fuck is this?" You know, and I have friends.
I think you're expecting too quick of an outcome for him saying, "Stop, Vladimir." Give it 2 weeks.
Was that not the best? You know, but he turned down Sarah Huckabee Sanders for FEMA relief.
Yeah, that's
and there is nobody more loyal than that weirdo. And it's unbelievable. You know, it's unbelievable. He really is screwing his own base.
He doesn't care. If you believe he's not going to run for re-election, that it's going to be his son or somebody else, he simply isn't constrained. Here's the difference between Trump 0.1 and Trump 2.0. The people who he used to have people around who put some constraints on him. He had some people who understood the institutional knowledge of organizations and departments. All that's gone. There is no one stopping him from his worst instincts. And so they're all coming out.
I don't disagree with you, Bill. And I'm not saying this as some kind of misguided optimist, but for me, the way I see it strategically is he's a brand man. He likes to put his name on everything, particularly those things he doesn't own. He just likes to license it, especially if it's a sinking ship. And right now, unfortunately, there may not be a bigger sinking ship than the United States itself. But he's going to keep his name to the brand for as long as possible. And right now, the next big thing is the election in 2028. I think he's going to cultivate to see who's going to bend and genuflect the most to kiss the ring. And at the very last minute, he's going to give the endorsement to that person. I
tend to agree.
Very, very, very interesting to learn how much money he has made in the market in the last couple of weeks.
Well, this
clearly can manipulate the market more than anybody else has ever been able to.
This whole crypto thing too, where he's inviting like the top holders of his meme coin. I mean, that is essentially just naked corruption. Right. Give me money and I will give you access. Can I just pop in here though? There's apparently a breaking story. The FBI has arrested a judge in Wisconsin.
In Wisconsin, yeah.
Yes, for on charges of obstructing immigration enforcement. Apparently, Kash Patel said that she intentionally misdirected federal agents away from an immigrant being pursued by federal authorities.
A federal judge?
A county judge in Milwaukee.
County judge?
In Milwaukee, yeah. So I got to ask the lawyers, does that happen a
lot? This is terrifying, but this is, this is the weapon.
It doesn't happen when it should.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're thinking about that. I'm thinking about how many Trump Bibles he's taking with him to the Vatican to the funeral, and how many he's going to try to sell in St. Peter's Square.
Yeah.
So I guess we have different priorities, Nancy.
Yeah. Okay.
Joel, you mentioned the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, and it looks like he's under fire yet again for another group chat, this time on Signal, because I guess WhatsApp is vulnerable. Allegedly sharing more classified information. And of course, the president, by way of his press secretary, Catherine Levitt, I'll let Nancy do the... What's that? Carolyn Levitt, I stand corrected. I'll let her do the impersonation later, is saying that the president is doubled down, that this is just another media circus regarding it, and yet the heads did start to roll, including Hegseth's own chief of staff. So do you think that the military establishment is going to go ahead and tolerate this for much longer?
They shouldn't tolerate it at all, and I don't think they will. And I think he's going to be gone. The guy is clearly a drunk. I mean, there's been some great memes about him looking at his phone screen. It's all blurred. I mean, this guy is obviously incompetent. He's going to continue to be incompetent, and he's going to be gone. There's only so much incompetence you can take, and this guy's going to keep exceeding his own, low bar. So he'll be gone. Yeah. But the Department of Defense was, I hope the military does, in a sense, save us. They may have to.
And I have a video with a little about head stuff.
Yeah. A lot of childish behavior at the White House as of late. Axios said Elon Musk had an expletive-filled chest-to-chest shouting match outside the Oval Office with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent over who would run the IRS. Bessent reportedly confronted Musk in the hallway of the West Wing and, quote, the F-bombs started to fly, or at least that's what Pete Hegseth texted his wife and brother. But the White House press secretary put a spin on it. She said, it's no secret President Trump has put together a team of people who are incredibly passionate about the issues impacting our country. Really? Because this is Scott Bessent. This guy is incredibly passionate. It looks like the only F word he's ever used before this is fiber.
Okay, Nancy, I've waited a long time to try to find a story that I could direct toward you. It looks like Senator Marco Rubio is finally the poster child of shrinkage. The State Department.
I was in the pool.
Well, it looks like the pool is being emptied of water. Secretary Rubio has announced cuts for a myriad programs and staff. He's already done so regarding the USAID, but this comes down to what is generally called in diplomatic circles American soft power and the way that it is projected around the world, the closure of embassies, as well as the services that are going to be performed there. For those who seemingly would either want to do business with or migrate or at least even visit the United States, it seems as though entry to the U.S. has declined sharply over the last 100 days from pretty much every country in the world. What is happening at the State Department, do you think?
Marco Rubio's soul has plainly abandoned his body. And I mean, you can see it in his eyes, those like dead brown eyes that he has now. He looks like the most miserable man in the world, except that he walked into that job. He essentially asked for it and took it. So now he's miserable, shockingly. I don't know. I mean, this to me is one of the great tragedies, and it's hard to describe to MAGA idiots, because if they go overseas, it's on a cruise ship, and they go someplace like Barcelona and run away when somebody pulls out a squirt gun. So I don't know. It's a tragedy. I mean, this is
talk about a brand
power. Yeah. The soft power of the United States is the foundation of world peace, at least post World War II world peace. And this is, erode it, and let's see what happens next.
You've tainted the brand. I mean, this is talk about a brand. We were the beacon of freedom, the beacon of light, the beacon of hope. None of those things. Mm-hmm. We're doomed. Exactly. We're depressed. We're angry. We're pissed. We're kicking people out. We're not accepting anybody. We're intolerant. We're intolerable. We are the ugly Americans in full breath. And this is just so sad to see people avoiding coming to the United States, where my grandparents, found a home and life. And it's just amazing that the brand of America, we are not what we were.
Right.
I mean, can you imagine? I mean, there's no reason why Prince Hakeem of Zamunda would come here to look for a bride anymore. I mean, look at how far we've gone, Eddie Murphy.
If you look up in Maine, places like that rely on Canadian tourism, people in northern Michigan, although
people in southeast Michigan, we have a bridge. We're going to have two pretty soon. And
but I mean, people that spend their summers in vacation places, up and down the East Coast. Anywhere where we have a border on the West Coast up in there, people are not, Canadians aren't coming in. The nicest people in the world are avoiding the United States of America. But musicians are canceling tours or just not scheduling them here. And other people are afraid to leave because they're being harassed when they come back in.
Yep.
And I don't know of anybody that has not been allowed back in yet. But I had a friend that had to, 24 hours before she came back from Mexico, had to answer all sorts of crazy questions that came from the State Department. And she was like, I come back, I have global entry. I do this, I have a home here. I go back and forth. And she got in, but it was a trial, and I can only see it getting worse with these people.
Yep.
I'm going to Portugal, and I confess, my wife is a little bit worried about my mouth at the border, especially coming back in. She said, they'll push you out. But I'm a little bit worried about when you come back in. I said, what do you got to worry about? You get the house. I'll go back to Portugal.
Actually, Bill,
I have three friends in Portugal right now. It's not fair.
I'll get a young bride named Maria.
You got the hat for me?
Or Charlene, Nancy?
Yeah.
But Bill, I mean, if you are coming back in, here's your hack. Make sure your mouth is full of a nata. Those pastiche de vellum. Those custard tarts are amazing. Well, speaking of being a border city, looking across at Canada, it looks like a local doctor is behind the winning bid for the Tower 600 purchase at the Renaissance Center. Dr. Mohammed Hadidi, as part of the consortium, won the bid at $9.2 million to go ahead and take over what used to be the Blue Cross building, or inhabited or occupied building. And he said that he wants to turn it into some kind of luxury apartments at 3,000 square feet or so for people moving downtown. Is this really going to be a flippable property, or is this just sort of riding on the coattails of Dan Gilbert knocking out the other two towers?
Is it one of the back, the ones that's farther back?
No. These are the two stubby ones on Jefferson.
No, it's farther back from the water, because the plan is to tear down the two they're closest to the water and leave the other two up. And so it's one of those.
No, but these aren't the ones that are around the Marriott. These are the two adjacent ones. This is one of the adjacent ones.
Okay,
yes, this is the 600. That's 5 and 600.
Yes.
The ones around are the others.
I don't know. I mean, maybe. I can't believe there's that much of a market for luxury condos. And I mean, I look at the prices on some of these places. It's just jaw-dropping.
It is.
I mean, is it that attractive? Do people have that much money that they need a pied-à-terre in beautiful downtown Detroit, especially there? I mean, but I don't know.
Wow. Well, you know, people like you who actually know what a pied-à-terre are may actually, there's a market right there, Nancy.
Such an international show. I love it so much.
What I find amazing is that Saeed apparently has enough bandwidth in his big brain to speak Spanish to the Pope, pack the right T-shirt to give him, but then also be completely up on what I consider a fairly obscure Eddie Murphy movie where he remembers the name of the main character and the fictional African country that he represented, and and he was a goth, and he knows all these bands too. It's just
and every band from the
See, this is what happens when people watch and listen as opposed to read. So, Alan,
I think it's interesting, with just as an aside on the RenCen, that GM's headquarters, they did have, I think, for a while, in more recent times, they had about 4,000 employees there. Now, I think it could be in the hundreds or maybe 1,000, but now they're moving into the Hudson's building. But really, the headquarters is, for all practical purposes, Warren at the Tech Center. They've got thousands of people. Mary Barr is there. That's where the designers are. It's really just more a namesake to have a headquarters in Detroit. Right now,
so I think what we should do is, right before the Hudson's hotel opens up, I'm going to give a few options here. We've got Faye Dunaway. We've got Shelley Winters. We've got Steve McQueen, Paul Newman. Who else do we got? William Holden and Richard Chamberlain. We could all go as the main cast of Towering Inferno.
Another classic.
I want to be Shelley.
And Paul Newman's son was in that with him when they were in that movie. He did have a little role in that. Little fun fact.
I think Bill having to be the straight guy has to be William Holden. No, actually, Alan, you would pull off William Holden with your countenance really, really well.
I agree. You're distinct, and you're tall. You know, you got that authority. It's good.
That's right. Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Layla, for the trigger. I'm leaving Paul Newman open for you because I want to be Steve McQueen. By the way, fun fact: they had such big egos that they couldn't agree as to whose name should go first in the opening credits. So if you watch it, you will find that one of the actors has their name to the left, but the other whose name is to the right is slightly above. So if you're reading, yeah,
that's actually a contract thing in Hollywood. It's like, because people read right to left, the left position is considered better, but so the right person gets it a little higher. So it's called like separate but equal sort of billing. But
wow,
there you go.
Wow.
Actually, in this day and age, it might be the only example of separation of powers that's still valid. So there you go. Alan, why don't we go?
I like what Lila has to say. Have you ever lost at Trivial Pursuit, Saeed?
Never.
Downtown Detroit, Robert Wells, Schmuck of the Week.
Okay, Bill. Just because the last pose you had, you look like you were pondering knight to bishop 4. Who's your Schmuck of the Week?
Well, I have a couple, but I think I'm going to go with California Judge Jeffrey Ferguson, who was recently convicted of second-degree murder after he shot his wife during an argument they had while watching TV. Apparently, Ferguson was so upset after shooting his wife, his son had tackled him and taken the gun away, despite the fact that during the trial he said, "Oh, I was just reaching for my ankle holster, fumbled the gun, and it went off." He did have a hung jury the first time, but was convicted the second time. He had 47 weapons in his house and over 26,000 rounds of ammunition.
Jesus.
Wow.
But this is my favorite part. After shooting his wife, he texted his clerk and bailiff saying, "I just shot my wife. I won't be in tomorrow. I'll be in custody."
He did not shoot the deputy.
Apparently that text
have a nice day.
Wow, I like that.
I recently did some time at the shooting range with my husband and some other people, and you realize when you actually fire a weapon that the whole idea that you can just drop one and it just goes off is so ridiculous. I mean, it's probably happened somewhere in the world, but you know.
But Nancy, with 47 guns in the house, I mean, you could easily trip and stub your big toe in the trigger, and it could go off. I mean,
there was a really funny story many years ago about a hunting dog that shot its own master, doing exactly that. The guy laid his shotgun somewhere, and the dog stepped on the trigger part, and so you know.
So Bill, one of the things you didn't say in the story that I think is really pressing is, what was the show they were watching?
Right.
It was Breaking Bad.
Was it really? They're going, no, Walter White's a good guy. No, he's an asshole. Hey, never call him an asshole again.
Maybe his defense should be that it was cosplay for the last scene in the series. So,
by the way, I want to get this out that Pete Hegseth certainly deserves a runner-up for installing a makeup studio at the Pentagon.
Very manly.
Look good.
Very manly.
So wait a minute. They're getting rid of DEI and allowing trans people to use the bathrooms of their choice, but he's putting in a makeup room.
He had put a makeup studio in the Pentagon next to the press room.
Yeah.
He probably here's what I wrote down. Probably needs it to cover up his perpetual state of drunkenness and his hangover. But yeah, he actually has a studio quality makeup room.
That confirms the rumor, Bill, that one of the additional cars in his motorcade is a pink Mary Kay automobile.
Those are great. Are they still around, by the way? Is Mary Kay dead? Has something happened to Mary Kay and her vehicles, her fleet? I haven't seen anything. I'm worried about it.
I think Mac and Sephora pretty much put her out of business there, Joel.
Mary Kay.
Barb.
I have two of them today. I think it's hard to go down to two. One would be the Department of Homeland Security, who released the address to the wife of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, which means that she is constantly getting death threats and she had to move, because that's what lovely MAGA people do when they get a victim in their sights. And it's just, I mean, Christy, and who believes that she didn't have any really important stuff in her purse that got stolen, but we're going to find out. The other one is the DNC, who's going after David Hogg, who is trying desperately to stop them from running people in their 70s and 80s over and over again for office. If the Democrats don't start paying attention to who they are running for office, we can count on the Trumpies, because they're running young people, and they're running young people so they can run for a really long time. They're paying attention to what's going on. If you talk to young people, they will tell you part of the problem is all these old people that have no idea of what it's like to live in this world that we're in right now. So
Nothing. I started doing my Susan Collins imitation to impress me.
That was actually
to me.
I was trying to compete.
There's a young guy running against her that has a cartoon.
Bill, stay in your lane.
Yeah, his saying is, I'm not concerned, I'm going to do something or something like that.
I have great misgivings about these younger people who are running and don't have the level of experience that I do. So there.
It's very close to JFK.
Bill, I'm pretty sure the phrase isn't imitation of imitation is the best form of flattery. So there you go. Joel.
I'm going to go, again, I'm going to a little piggyback on Barbara. Kristi Noem, head of Homeland Security, loses her fucking purse. That's great to know. I'm glad to know that the most important thing in her that she possesses in her life really is that purse. And it's good to know that the one that I can trust with my security has lost her purse and everything in it.
Which had her security badge in it, but any makeup lost can now be found at the Pentagon. So
you pick the best and the brightest. Then it's Marjorie Taylor Greene for her very kind words of the Pope upon his death.
Oh my God!
That the world has rid itself of evil I was beyond shocked. Again, I think Pope Francis was just a decent, humble, modest man.
Oh, wait. Joel, are you really trying to convince anybody that you were shocked by the fact that Marjorie Taylor Greene was crass and tasteless?
Oh, no. But evil is attention to the Pope. This Pope is like, my God. And then she proudly proclaimed herself a white nationalist Christian. So that was always, she's my favorite. So Marjorie, you keep rocking. Schmuck of the week, consistent.
Even Martin Luther didn't go there.
I want to say something. Kristi Noem's purse. When I was in D.C., there was a problem with couples. There'd be like these couples who would go to fancy restaurants and hang out in the bars and stuff like that, the bar part. And they would distract people, and someone would go in the purse. And I was with somebody, a friend who worked for ABC News, and we were having drinks, and then after like a couple hours, she's like, "I thought I brought my purse," and by the time she figured out that her credit cards had been stolen, the person had already bought a computer before she canceled. So it's a common thing, but if you're Homeland Security, you got to have.
And aren't other people with
you?
So
most women know this.
Yeah,
maybe from North Dakota you don't know this, but I don't put my purse where anybody can slip by and do it. Or you take a tiny one, or you do, and you don't carry $3,000 cash in it either.
She's got a security team following her everywhere. For God's sake,
the whole thing's absurd.
If you were raised by my mother, you never leave a candle burning in a room that doesn't have a person in it, and you never leave your purse like it always has to be like over your knee, or it's just and some law enforcement person I think pointed out whoever stole it was probably just after the purse. I mean the Gucci, the fact that it was a Gucci bag is like, because they're not traceable, they don't have secure or serial numbers in them, they're easy to fence because they're expensive and people pay money for them, and all the shit that was inside was just like, woo.
I would love for somebody to then disclose that it's a fake.
Right, it's probably
that would just be poetic.
Yeah.
All right,
and then she paid full price for.
All right, I hate to make I feel like I'm wearing a groove with this guy, but I got to go with Croaky again. RFK and his autism registry, which everything that happens in this administration, I find myself going, is this even legal? It's like we have all these HIPAA laws so that, I couldn't, if my daughter was in the hospital, I couldn't get information about her because of her, medical privacy. But apparently Croaky and his minions can go out and call up pharmacies and hospitals and so forth, and compile a registry of people on the autism spectrum. I mean, how the hell is this happening? And as many people with autism have spoken up in their own defense in recent days and said, the hell you are, it defies belief. And it's like the baby, let's have more babies, pronatalism. It's so clueless and tone deaf. I just wonder if if they aren't planting their own seeds for their destruction with every one of these, knuckleheaded moves that they make. So that would be.
I have people on my Facebook page defending it.
Defending it? Why?
Because what harm does collecting data and research? What harm is that?
Yeah,
would you ask them if they'd be okay with registering guns?
Yeah, guns.
I already know the answer to that one. I had that conversation many times. It's mind-boggling to me. It's if you go, you're on my Facebook page, you can see the whole thing. It's like it almost broke my heart, because this is a person that I like, but it's like, we're doing the research. The research is there. It's not compiling things to use on people later.
Right.
No, it's so bad.
One of my favorite scenes in Red Dawn, the original movie, is the one where after they've landed in Colorado or wherever the hell the Soviets are, somebody says the officer barks to another thing, go to City Hall and find registry of everyone with gun. so he can confiscate them. Anyway,
that's what happened.
Look for them to be the militia that's against them. That's what they're really looking at. Well, I mean, I object to data collection because I don't want to be posthumously retroactively converted to the Mormon Church, because that's a thing. I mean, if I'm going to do it, I want to do it in this lifetime. Allan,
I'm going to go with Kash Patel, who New York Times reported he's been dating this country western singer Alexis Wilkins, and she's part of the Nashville music scene. And he has flown with a government jet to Nashville on different occasions, and they won't say anything about it, only to say, take our word for it, everything's being done appropriately. In 2022, Christopher Wray, the FBI director, was grilled by Senator Josh Hawley about him taking a trip, vacation in New York State with his family and using the government jet. And Ray said that was reimbursed by me. We don't have any idea. I actually put in a freedom of information for the Kash Patel thing, which I'm sure they'll just blow it off. But I mean, who can trust this government? We're talking about even where Trump, the administration says we're negotiating with China on tariffs, and China's like, that's bullshit. We're not talking about tariffs with them. So we can't trust really much that comes out from the administration.
No.
Or China.
All right.
Can't trust either side of it, of that debate. Can't trust China. I mean, they're fairly well known,
Right.
and so is the Trump administration.
Right.
Liars. Before you, are you going to go to the end? No, you.
No. Yeah, go ahead, Bill. Go ahead.
Nothing. I know. You go ahead. I just want give me a second at the end before you go to.
You got it. Okay. Well, my schmucks of the week are actually all of the plaintiffs in the case that was just presented with oral arguments at the Supreme Court, Mahmoud versus Taylor, which comes from Maryland. The named plaintiffs are Tamer Mahmoud and his wife Anas Barakat, but there's other non-Muslim plaintiffs to this who brought the case against the Montgomery County School District on seeking a religious exemption for their kids from being subjected to supplemental literature in the school dealing with LGBTQ themes or what they call gay books. They want to have a religious exemption from I'm not sure what, because the kids weren't being forced to read it. They weren't part of a curriculum. But it seems as though the danger of the U.S. Supreme Court then allowing religious exemptions to anything that is going to be considered problematic means that someone can say, I don't want my kids learning about Judaism. I don't want my kids learning about Islam. I don't want my kids learning about any number of things, which you're already seeing happening in places like Florida, where they're banning Holocaust studies and other topics that they find to be problematic. So the fact that the religious exemption clause could be weaponized is something that these people seem to be willing dupes into, again, subverting American constitutional law. But hot off the presses, my other schmuck is former and fully disgraced and now convicted and sentenced felon GOP Congressman George Santos, where the judge just sentenced him to 87 months in prison for, in quotes, unparalleled crimes. Of course, he was crying about it. And apparently in an interview about a month ago, when asked, would he be seeking a pardon from President Trump, he said, quote, you bet your sweet ass I would. Well, George is apparently seeking a pardon and hoping that Trump swipes right to give it to him. So, anyway,
all right.
Bill,
I just wanted to mention that I was at a retirement party this week for somebody who in this community is or should be a legend. Julianne Cuneo retired as a private investigator this week. She's well known for a number of her cases. She handled hundreds of my cases. She was a woman in a man's industry when I met her in the early 1990s as a private investigator. She was unparalleled. If you'll recall, she got the Hires brothers off, two guys who were wrongly convicted for murders they didn't commit, served over 20 years in prison, and her hard work and tenacity got them out. She's done it with at least half a dozen other wrongly convicted people. And she did more. One of the things I said at her retirement party was, I'm a civil litigator and I've gotten my clients a lot of money. Every client that who knew her, that when she worked on cases for me, loved her. And the reason they loved her is they appreciated the fact that I got them money, but they knew she cared about them. She was an investigator that never quit. And I just wanted, after the Schmuck of the week, to give her a kudos.
Yep.
All right. I also did the investigation that got Bobby Knight fired.
Really?
Really impressive. Yeah.
Got it. No,
and the reason, listen, I had only tangential involvement, but they called her up. They were having a lot of trouble finding a private investigator to do the investigation who didn't know who Bobby Knight was. And she said, who the hell is Bobby Knight? And they hired her. She went down to Bloomington, Indiana, and they were ready to fire him before her investigation.
Yeah, they were.
They said, oh my God, what they found, in terms of what she found out.
Yeah.
Did she
never
interview,
want her investigating me.
Bill, did she interview the chair that he threw across the court?
No, she didn't. But she found out that Bobby Knight was not just abusive to his to the kids who played or to the referees, but almost every employee in athletic department.
Throwing a vase against a wall to shatter over a woman's head. I remember that detail. That was and yet I was living in Indiana at the time, and there were people who defended every part of this. I mean, sports makes people crazy, as I think Joel can probably attest, right?
This made me crazy.
Yeah. So there you go.
I coached in Indiana while he high school when basketball when he was there, and he came in and look at he came in screaming and yelling at one of the guys on our team who he was recruiting and said, if you can't play better than that with more heart than that, you're never gonna and he went on and on, and I went, do we allow people to come in and talk to our kids like that? That's Bobby Knight. He can do anything he damn well pleases.
And that's part of what his downfall, though, because what happened was kids who were coming up who had talent, they didn't want to play for a guy like that. I mean, they wanted to play for like somebody like Phil Jackson. You know, of course he was a pro coach, but you know, somebody who said, "Hey, let's all do yoga together," you know, and let's do Zen. I mean, that old school shit just didn't fly with the modern high school athlete. But anyway,
all right.
I'm going to say Shannon Sharp from ESPN, who there was a recording of him saying that he's going to basically choke the shit out of a girlfriend. He's 56. I think she was 20. And he said, she goes, I don't want to be choked. And he says, you're going to be choked. And, you know, and so now he's taken a leave, but he's also, I think she's accused him of sexual assault.
She has. There's a suit that's filed.
So now he's sort of stepped aside. He was going to sign $100 million contract with ESPN. So
he's great on that show. I mean, you know, his football analysis is wonderful. And and again, he's very charming. He's like super appealing.
Yeah, but Joel, you know, they've got to be charming to get to where they get to be able to abuse it. Charles Pugh was a charming guy. Yeah. He was also just abusive.
Right. It's part of the pathology.
Well, especially if Stephen A. Smith leaves ESPN to run for president again, they're going to need that. But isn't that still a smaller age gap than anybody who dates Leo DiCaprio?
Caroline Levitt's
oh my God, Belichick's 73. I think his girlfriend's 25.
Caroline Levitt's husband is in his well into his 60s. I'm sure. I know.
She can go college, right?
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you, audience, for being here for another show. Thank you to our awesome panelists. Always, we're a little bit trimmer today, but still certainly as fierce. Thank you, Nancy Derringer. Thank you, Barb Ingalls. Thank you, Joel Sklar. Thank you, Bill Seikaly. And thank you, and as always, with the last word, Allan Lengel.
Drive home safely.
Have a great weekend, everybody. And have a great week.